Hi, and welcome to another episode of Resilience Reborn. I'm Angie.
And I'm Trey.
We are very excited for this episode today. We have Paul Doughty here with us. Hi, Paul. Welcome.
Hello, Angie. Trey. Yes.
We are so excited to have you here, and we have quite a story. Lots of things in your story that just have kind of brought you to where you are. And so we are really excited to have you on our podcast just to kind of share your story. So we're going to dive right in. So the first question that I want to ask you is share a little bit about your life growing up, how your household was. I know that there was some domestic violence there. So kind of just bring us in, from the beginning.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's much appreciated.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
appreciate the opportunity to share my story and hopefully be able to help some others that may have experienced something similar.
Mm-hmm.
So, I grew up in a house in Pennsylvania. I grew up in Pittsburgh in a small little town called Wilmerding. And I lived there with my parents and two older sisters. I had a family around. We were an Italian family, so there was a lot of cousins and uncles around.
Mm-hmm.
But the domestic violence, if you looked from the outside in, it looked like the perfect family, right? My father was a football coach. My mother was a choreographer and a dance teacher. My sisters were baton twirlers that traveled competitively, and I was a drummer. But if you looked from the outside in, it looked like the perfect family.
It does do that a lot. I've seen that where it does look like that perfect family on the outside, but on the inside you just have no idea.
Exactly. Yeah, you close the door and it's a different story. I remember a few incidents, and many of the incidents my sisters had to tell me about, because the first incident I remember, or the last incident I remember, was my father was in the kitchen with my uncle. It was a small kitchen when you first walked in. Again, this was 1970s. There was a rotary phone with a 20-foot cord tied in about 20 knots that you could stretch halfway across the house. So my father was sitting at one side of the table. My uncle was sitting at the other side of the table. And the table overlooked a small window to the sun porch, and my mother was standing in the kitchen. And I heard an argument. So I peeked around the corner, and I'm 5 years old at this time. I peeked around the corner, and I saw my father pick up a half-gallon glass milk jug and swing it and hit my mother over the head. My mother falls to the ground. My uncle yells, "Doughty!" He stands up. And as my mother lays there motionless, I thought she was dead. And that one incident impacted me my whole life. And I didn't realize that, and didn't realize the impact of witnessing domestic violence until I took action. And I took action with counseling. And when I started counseling, I was able to open up my mind and my heart to what I was feeling.
Right.
And what I was feeling was love. Love for myself, love for others, and the love for the world around me. But
what age was that you finally trying to turn that leap over?
Unfortunately, it was 35 years old.
Okay.
So
I
wasted, not wasted, but I walked through life, autopilot, going through the motions for 30 years because of that incident, quite honestly. So it took a while to understand that.
To even figure out what was going on because you were so small.
Yeah, I was so small, and when you grow up that way, from the age of 4 to 11, my parents divorced when I was 11. I thought it was normal, right? That's normal. And we used to hear the same type of abuse happening right next door, the same next house over, same type of stuff. So, yeah, I probably thought it was normal.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, gosh.
I think that's where, I was thinking about this. I think that's where my resilience started back then, because not so much because I separated, because there is probably a fine line there between having resilience and then just separating and just forgetting it like I did. But I think it planted the seed for resilience, to at least start to understand who I was and plant that seed of resilience so that I could learn later on in life how to get past that.
I think that it's a coping mechanism when you're that young. You're trying to, blank it off like that. I have not a similar experience with domestic violence, but when I lost my mom at 15, it was like a coping mechanism. It was just like shut it off and move on.
It's true. It's a way to probably protect yourself.
Yeah.
Right. But when you do that for so long, then there's a negative impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So moving on a little bit further, so clearly we know that you thinking that your mother was dead.
Yes.
How did you cope with just that?
Well, quite honestly, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because when that happened, that's the last I remember. I mean, I remember them fighting in the bedroom, and I remember me huddling with my sisters, like just, trying to feel safe when the abuse was going on. But yeah, I don't know. Because quite honestly, I know that I just went blank after that.
Yeah.
I went blank.
Oh gosh.
For a number of years.
Okay, so then after this all occurs, what did you kind of turn to? What was the things that impacted you most? Were there other people in your life? Were there certain things that you did that kind of propelled you to keep moving forward?
Great question. Well, there were two things that saved my life back then. One was a supportive adult, and that was my grandmother. My grandmother was my father's mother, and I spent a lot of time with her. She lived in this 5-story brick building for like 40 years that overlooked the park where we all hung out as kids. And she would know if you got out of someone's car, who you were hanging out with. She could see and smell things from a half mile away.
Yeah.
That kind of grandmother.
That kind of grandmother.
Very nice.
Yeah, I would see her standing out of the sun porch window on the 4th floor all the time. And I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. We were very close. That's where I felt safe. She was my anchor. That's where I felt normal, and where I learned my manners and what was right from wrong. So my grandmother, even though I didn't tell her about what was going on, I never did. Not until, I don't know, almost before she died, did I tell her or mention it. I mentioned it to her. Mm-hmm. But she saved my life and didn't know it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the second thing that saved my life was being a part of a community back then. And that community for me was football. I played football from 3rd grade through 12th grade. And in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I walked to practice 1 mile each way for 3 years. And I when I was just, why did I do that? I could have quit. Nobody would have said anything.
Yeah.
Nobody would even noticed. Because again, but I that was my family again.
Mm-hmm.
It's where I felt safe. It was where I could release some of my anger, if you will, playing football, and so that saved me as well.
Okay.
Because it kept me from self-isolating. Because when you're depressed and you're going through those types of things, you self-isolate, and most people do. And
Yes.
when you do that, it just makes things worse. So I think by playing sports and it kept me developing my character and valuable life skills that I would use later on, that saved my life.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving now past this, you found, that you really, really had a safe space with your grandmother and football. Then let us travel with you on what happened next.
Yeah. Well, I was unsupervised from the age of 12 to 18. So my parents got divorced, and my father was, when you get divorced, I don't know what he was doing. He was out running around. But my mother wasn't around either. My mother was living with a priest, quite honestly.
Okay.
So she was never around. My sisters, for the most part, raised me. My older sister raised me for the most part. But my sister, when my mother wasn't there, my older sister was a senior in high school. So, I mean, they were partying, right? So our house became a party place for after, my parents got divorced and my mother wasn't there. So that's what they did. They just partied and I was out running around doing mischievous things. I should have been dead many times from the drugs and alcohol that I was using to numb the pain. So that was one of the things that from the age of probably 12 till 35, I spent a lot of times doing drugs and alcohol. So, that brings a whole nother aspect.
Yeah. So
into
now
your
that's,
life.
yes.
And, I was playing rugby at this time as well. So, after high school, that was after college, I should say. So let me start over. Where was I?
Back to high school.
Back to high school.
You were partying, drugs, alcohol during high school because your sisters were raising you.
Right. So, from the age of 12 to 18, I was on my own, doing a lot of drugs and alcohol. And there were many times that I lost my train of thought. I'm glad it's not live.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So let me ask you this just on
go
that point. So 12, 13 years old, you're going out, you're having drugs, alcohol. Your sister is there, but she's kind of doing her own thing at that age.
Right.
Did she ever notice that or say anything like, hey, maybe we need to straighten this up? Or was it kind of like, you got this, go ahead?
Yeah, I don't think anyone noticed. Okay. Yeah, I don't think anyone noticed. And at the 12 and 13, I don't think I was into drugs just then.
Okay.
It was more just alcohol. Because I was, we had a cabin in the woods and we would go down there and drink the alcohol and, we would steal the alcohol from the house. And
now would this be like your football teammates, the rugby teammates? Like that's who you hung around with and that's just what you guys did?
Yeah, it wasn't. The friends I had back then were a little older than me, so
Okay.
they were maybe 2-3 years older.
Gotcha.
So they weren't the kids I played football with.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it was that time when you go through high school and you're drinking and smoking pot before high school. You're going through the motions again. So again, I went through half my life just going through the motions. And I think the drugs and alcohol stunted my ability to grow. Because all it did was set me back. As opposed to when I had an awakening and I got out of that funk. Because And when that happened, I was in a bad place. I was in a dark place. I was doing bad things. I was hurting people. I wasn't taking care of myself. Those are the types of things when you do to yourself. But,
Absolutely.
What ended up happening is I ended up taking action. So at 35 years old, I went to see a therapist. I finally said, well, I got to do something here.
Yeah. Because you just knew you were going down a path that was leading to nowhere.
Yes.
Okay.
Was that a self-conscious decision, or was that someone on the outside maybe saying, like
Yeah.
a relationship?
Yeah, no, it wasn't anyone else. It's
Okay.
funny that you asked that because, again, I was, even at the time of 35, so I skipped some area there. So at 27, I was playing rugby, I was drinking, snorting cocaine. I was married, I had 2 kids. I walked out. I was lost. And this was right around the time when I started to break through a little bit. Because I started to wake up and I was like, I don't like where I am. I don't like where I am. So that's kind of what initiated the therapy. So I started therapy.
And this was post walking out of your family?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And again, I was a little before, it's probably 32 at this time, before I kind of had the big awakening. So I started therapy, and it was apparent to the therapist that I didn't remember anything. So the therapist contacted my mother, said, you better write Paul a letter because he doesn't remember anything. So the therapist wrote me a letter. My mother wrote me a letter, kind of gave me some context of when things happen and why things happen. So that letter, along with the therapy, kind of, again, I started to break through some of that fog. And then things started to happen as I started to break out of that fog. I had just left my kids and my family, and I was in information technology and IT, and I was assigned to a project in Cleveland. So I go to Cleveland, and the project site is right next to a church. I never used to go to church, but I went over to church at lunch hour a few times, and I ended up writing the priest a letter. I wrote him a letter saying that I'm going through all this change, these things are happening to me, I just left my family. And then I ended up meeting with the priest. And the result of that meeting was, he said, just pray. What is it that you want from me right now, oh Lord? Okay, so probably a month or so later, I'm sitting at a bar, drowning my sorrows. It's a busy bar, there's a lot of people around, there's a DJ playing behind me. And I look at a bottle of vodka behind the bar and I say, what is it that you want from me right now, oh Lord? And when I said that, the DJ said, yes, that is God. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew he was talking to me. Yeah. So then another time I was in this busy public area by the beach, and I was looking for a place to pray. Again, I don't always look for a place to pray back then. And so I said, well, I'll just drive along this coastal road and see if I can find a place to pray. So I'm driving along the road, and I come around the corner, and there's this big opening. So I pull my car down, and then I come walking up to this opening. And there's a circular formation in the ground outlined with rocks. It was a labyrinth. Labyrinths have been used for thousands of years as a spiritual tool for meditation and reflection. And labyrinths have one way in and one way out. So I started walking through this labyrinth, and I got to the center of the labyrinth. And I looked down, and there's this little pile of rocks, and sticking out of the rocks is a crucifix of Jesus. And this overlooks a lighthouse, and this lighthouse flashes 1, 4, 3 for I love you. So the lights go 1, 4, 3 for I love you. So somebody was trying to tell me something.
And this is in Pennsylvania?
I'm sorry?
The labyrinth was in Pennsylvania?
No, this was somewhere else.
Cleveland. Sorry, Cleveland.
Yeah, somewhere else. Mm-hmm. But, and then on September 12th, 1998, which was my birthday, I quit drinking and haven't had a drink for 26 years. So that was kind of my awakening and kind of got me started into, and I forgot one thing, which is very important. My mother had given me, when I was going through therapy, my mother gave me a tape. It was a cassette tape of a book called 101 Ways to Transform Your Life by Dr. Wayne Dyer. And that book gave me a lot of insight as well. That helped me a lot to break through that fog, because he talks about how we're all interconnected, and he kind of gives you the understanding that there's much more to what we see. So it kind of gave me a much bigger perspective of life and beyond life. So that gave me the foundation to be able to continue, and gave me the inspiration to continue, and that's what kind of catapulted me ahead.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah. I mean, just all those, people call them coincidences, but obviously they weren't, you know.
There was divine intervention.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow.
So you had this turning point. You knew you were resilient, and you really truly had been all these years. It's just it took a lot longer and a different path to get where you were. Okay.
Yes.
So after this happened, where did that take you in your life? What did you do with this? You said you got sober, and
Right.
but keep taking us on your journey.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm somewhat proud of is I was a football coach for 10 years. I coached youth football. And I always talked to the kids not to teach them about football. It was more to me. It was teaching them about life. And that was important to me, so as you could see. Because I actually went to see one of the kids who just, why am I getting emotional?
It's a powerful story, and all these things, they brought you to where you are right now, and you're sitting here and you're telling this incredible story, and it's just powerful, and it's just hard. Yeah. It's hard sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I went to see one of the kids I coached, and he played 5 years in college, and I went to see him on his last game, and it was special for me to see him. And he wrote me a note saying how special it was for him. So
because of that impact. And I think that sometimes, I sit and think, we have two girls, 11 and 14, and they have been through some stuff, I mean, they see my anxiety, they see, all of my pain from, when my first husband died. They have watched him, be active with alcoholism and then go away to rehab. And they've lived through all of that, and they have to cope. And so sometimes I would think I'm just not a good parent. We're not doing this the right way. But it's things like that you just said with the letter, that no matter where you were in your life, you had that impact on him.
Yes.
And so I think now we've used our adversities to coach our girls through life.
Yes.
And so that's why it's emotional. That's why, because for you, you're like, wow, even with your past and how broken you were, that impact that you had on those young people is just, I'm a choir director too, so I get that. Yeah. I have coached many kids through a lot of things, and it's so good to feel that you did that. So
I think too that connection a long time ago when you were using football as an escape, which I think a lot of kids do. They, I know that she's even had kids who would go to school just so they could get out of the hell that they were in at home.
Yeah.
So I think there was that connection too. It's like this was powerful to help me.
It was kind of full circle moment for you, I feel like, maybe, because you did put everything into that when you were younger, and then you're here coaching these kids.
Yeah, and what's ironic is my dad was a football coach too. Oh, I think I mentioned
you
that
did
early
mention
on.
that, but
so he was a football coach too. My uncle was a coach, so football was
just a thing.
It's
Yeah,
inbred in in my family. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, so you did the football coach, and then now, how did the relationship end up with your wife and your kids, and then kind of moving forward with that?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, I left my two kids and my first wife. I'm going to see one from here, my daughter. So I see them all the time. I have 3 stepkids with my second ex-wife, as well as the third child with my second wife. So I have 6 kids, 3 stepkids.
Okay.
What was your question?
We're keeping on going. And so you do have the relationship with your kids that you walked out on.
Yes.
But then so you eventually did get remarried.
I did get remarried. As I mentioned, I have 3 stepkids and another child with my second marriage. His name is Sam, still living at home. And when I started going through, when I had the awakening, I met my second wife. And she ended up moving to Pittsburgh with her 3 kids, my 3 stepkids, and lived there for a number of years. And then she hated Pittsburgh because she came from where the beach was. So we moved to Situate, Massachusetts, to where the beach is. I was married for 23 years. It was good at first, but then my wife cheated on me for 12 years. I never knew. Because I was in IT, I was traveling 4 days a week. I traveled all the time. So I found that out, and oh man, yeah, and it was a very emotional, abusive marriage. I asked myself this because I think being close to abuse, having that experience, it's almost like I didn't realize it for a while, right? It's almost like, wow, I'm being emotionally abused, but I didn't realize it. So that lasted a long time until I had enough. And it was a very horrible divorce. Yeah. I mean, I slept on the couch for 4 years. She wouldn't leave. Talk about resilience.
Yeah.
Yeah, she wouldn't leave, so I ended up sleeping on the couch, and I couldn't get her out of the house. She wouldn't leave. So we finally agreed on a divorce. And the day that we left court, we were supposed to get together and go through the house to see, we'll take turns and take things, right? And I came home from somewhere, and she was packing everything up. And I said, "What are you doing? Kleptomaniac."
Right?
That didn't go over very well. So I started walking over. I said, I knew there was a picture over here that I wanted of Sam playing football. So I went and grabbed that picture, and then she attacked. She came after me because I had the picture. So she hit me once, hit me twice from the back. She came around and pushed me, and I have my cell phone. I'm trying to take a picture or get a video of this, right? And I couldn't. So I ended up dropping the picture, and then she let me go. I called 911. The cops came, and she left. That's how I got her out of the house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Talk about a last hurrah.
Oh, my God. Yeah. It took me 4 years. I've never told anybody this. It took me 4 years. So if I wouldn't have had the resilience of going through all the adversity and the challenges that I had all my life, that only helped me.
I was just getting ready to ask you, so you didn't waver with your recovery or any of that you had been moving forward during this whole time. No. You were just resilient and standing tall, and wow.
Yeah, for 4 years, yeah.
So many people would have regressed. I just know it. They would, find that they would go back to that place, and that's pretty dang awesome.
Well, thank you. And I never thought of that, because when I quit drinking, it was divine intervention, as I mentioned. It was a snap of the fingers. It wasn't hard for me, and I hate to say that because so many people struggle.
It's not.
They struggle. And it's so hard, but it wasn't for me. Yeah. And I never have even thought about God. I go to sit in the bar and have something to eat at the bar, and it doesn't bother me. I go buy a bottle of wine for somebody and sit and drink
This
there
is
with
you.
know,
This is
I'm
drink.
I'm the same way. I would just, and it was almost instantaneous. Once I kind of
because you had that.
let that go and bring, and let God into my life. At first it wasn't God, but it was something similar that I came up, but as soon as I let something bigger than me into my life, put it that way, the obsession was lifted completely, and I haven't thought about it since. It's amazing. And I think that, just going back to that, I think a lot of people, if they would just kind of open their minds up to that, they would cease the struggling.
Well,
that you were
and it's
talking
similar
about.
too with him, because you said you didn't go to church, and then all of a sudden you're here next to a church with your job.
Yeah.
And same for Trey. He never really had any type of faith growing up, since his mom died. And then he found his faith, and it was just like that. Just like, I love that those stories are very similar.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
That's great.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Let me go back real quick, because I feel like there's probably a lot of people in our audience that or some people that might be going through something similar with so we'll go back to when you left your family. You were in a bad place. No one can understand what that feels like except yourself. Everybody will look at you like, I can't believe you left your family, and you, right?
Yeah.
But inside yourself, so you got right. What's that conversation like to get back into your children's lives and explain that, what was going on with you to them and help them understand that?
Yeah, I think they're still learning.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because I do public speaking for teenagers, high school students, and my daughter came to my first one where I talked about some of the things that we talked about, and she didn't know any of these stories. And my other son just listened to a podcast I was on, and he was like, "Boy, I didn't know these things." I said, "Well, nobody did. Nobody did." But to answer your question, I remember telling my kids when I was leaving. We went down in the basement. 4 and 6 years old. And, I was traveling. Like I said, I was traveling 4 days a week. So I used that as saying, well, Dad's going away just like he's traveling. And I had a little, some poster board or something I was writing on. And all I remember is my daughter crying. And that took it out of me. But I'm with them all the time. I see them all the time. I have 6 kids who love me. So that's all that matters. So, I was out of their life, not out of their life. I was removed a little bit because when I left Pittsburgh, we moved to Boston. My 2 kids stayed in Pittsburgh. So I would see them every month or 2 when I would go back to see them. I didn't see them as often as I did when we lived in Pittsburgh. Because, you do the weekend things and all that. But, so I never really lost touch with them. But I think my relationship has gotten better over the course of the past several years, especially since I got divorced. Because, quite honestly, they didn't want to be around my second wife. Okay. At least my son didn't. Yeah. So, that kind of kept them at a little distant. So over the past 3 years, it's been great because I've seen them all the time now. So it's gotten a lot better, the relationship. And the relationship with my stepkids is really good as well.
Wow. That's awesome.
And it's kind of, because I went through something similar with when I had to go away to rehab. And basically the message was, I can't be here. I shouldn't be here for you the way I am now. And I can't be here the way I need to be until I get right myself. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what you were doing. You were getting right yourself. So I totally understand that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I love that they have come around and now they see you, speaking and telling your story. And it's like an aha moment for them that it wasn't just my dad's leaving.
Yes. Well, I told my daughter after that first time, I said, Katie, I could have been married to Marilyn Monroe, and it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah. Right?
Because it wouldn't have mattered who I was married to. It could have been XYZ. It didn't matter. It was going to happen.
Right.
It was going to happen because I was just in that state.
Yeah, you were in a situation that you just no longer could not be in.
Right.
Just in the state that you were, right? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So 4 years you got out of that marriage she left after you called the cops. Okay. So since then, that's been how many years ago now?
Not that long. 2.
Okay.
It'll be 2 this January.
Okay. Yeah. So what has happened in those 2 years now that that's where you're at?
Yeah. Well, boy.
A loaded question. Yes, you were free.
It was quite, the last 10 years of the marriage was very contentious. Mm-hmm. So I was so relieved when the cops came.
Yes.
And she left.
Yeah.
I was so relieved that I don't know if I could describe it. Yeah. It was because it was a long time that I lived this way.
Yeah.
And I was being suppressed. And it was like I had a voice again. That's what it was like. That I had a voice again. But since then, I've always wanted to do public speaking. And I had it on hold for the longest time because it wasn't the right time. Right? I was going through all kind of things. So since then, I've focused on public speaking. I have as well wrote a book. It's going to be published in the next few weeks.
Oh, yay.
Oh, nice.
Resilience, My Ultimate Superpower is the name of the book.
This is your logo on your shirt, right?
This one says Resilience is my superpower. Uh-huh. But there was a book named Resilience is my superpower, so I had to change it to Resilience, My Ultimate Superpower. Okay. So, that book will, again, kind of describe my life. It'll take us through my life. It's not a autobiography by any means, but it does kind of mimic my speech to the teenagers about speaking up, being involved, embracing self-discovery, which is all taking action to build resilience. That's my message to the teenagers. So I focused a lot of time on my book, as well as I'm in the process of writing I'm having a TV series written on my story.
Wow. Oh,
wow. The working title for that is Behind the Curtain. Okay. It will focus a lot on my life and my time alone, my time with my mother not being home and living with a priest. So a lot of that will be told in that TV series, and some of that will be mentioned in my book as well.
Okay.
So that's what I've been focusing on since.
Yeah.
I'm excited because I want to help people. I've always wanted to help people. That's all I do. Yeah. So this gives me the platform to be able to help people, just as you're trying to do with this podcast. So I think we're in this together
100%
to help people that maybe be suffering from some of the things that we experienced and be able to help them. That's my message.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times I say I've found, so in February it will be 20 years since my husband passed away, and it hasn't been until the last 3 years. So you're talking 17 years later that I finally think I found purpose in my pain. And that is, even just along with him, I think that he finally came to the realization too, that this is what we should be doing. This, having guests like you on, that we can it's a platform. I sit in these chairs and I have interviewed other widows, and I am in awe of their perspective because I didn't have that perspective. I was 25, and I just wish that we had something like this when that happened to me.
Yeah.
Like, it is amazing what we all can do and how much, like, even this one episode with you is going to it's going to touch so many people, and it's going to resonate with so many people because, like you said at the very beginning, you just don't know that everything just looks good from the outside a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But there's so much brokenness.
Yes.
So much brokenness.
Yeah, every family has dysfunction.
They do.
Right?
Yep.
It's just
It's in everyone's life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
And we hit it, a lot of it, I think, just when he was actively drinking and all,
That's all I did was hide it. I mean, that was my big thing was.
And it was not until we decided not to do that things actually started happening for us. Yes. And I think with you too,
Yes.
it wasn't until you acknowledged it and you started to seek out the things that could, help you, whether it be that divine intervention or, you just going into the church building, you know what I mean? Things like that. I think that once we open ourselves up to that and we feel vulnerable, that's when the work really starts to happen, I think, which is scary, but it's beautiful.
It is, and it seems like it's happening for both of us or all of us.
I know, because we are on the same wavelength, because that's all we want to do is, speak and tell people, how they can be resilient and work through that. So, any last thoughts do you have? Did we cover everything the message that you wanted to share? Is there anything that we missed?
Well, I know that you've left out some parts of your story just purposely because you want to be able to share it with.
We want people to buy your book.
The book,
when it comes out,
and
right?
watch the series and really fill in those blanks. But I think your story kind of reminds me of like I don't know, for lack of a better word, like an onion with a lot of layers.
Yes.
That could touch a lot of different people. Someone might not, resonated with the domestic violence, but they might resonate with, not being right somehow and having to step away from their family to,
That's a good point.
or
You do have a lot of layers.
Yeah, or being in a relationship that's just so toxic and you can't get out of it, but you do everything you can to push through, and then finally, eventually, you get to a point to where you can get out of it, and now you focus on yourself, right? Which some people think, because I when I got back, I had to focus on myself. I had to be selfish, because without finding myself, who I am and what I wanted to do, I wouldn't be a help to anybody, my wife, my daughters, or now anybody else out there. So they're tough decisions that we make as individuals to a greater cause. Yeah. And no one understands it. Sometimes even we don't until we get to that part,
Yeah, it does bring up, I think there maybe is one other thing that I want to mention, only because it might be able to help somebody. I went through a very depressing state. I had Lyme disease for 10 years. So I had Lyme disease for 4 or 5 years before I even knew it. And then I was on antibiotics for 4 or 5 years, taking 3 or 4 at a time. And, it was horrible. Yeah. So I ended up coming out of that totally depressed. I was suicidal after the Lyme disease. I ended up taking action and found TMS therapy, transcranial. I've
never heard of that.
Well, we've heard of every therapy.
I know, right? We've tried them all, but not this one.
Transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS therapy.
Okay.
I was suicidal, so I found TMS therapy, a healing house in Florida. They put a thing on your head, and they find different, and they simulate the cells of your brain, or stimulate the cells of your brain with magnetic. So, so they tapped on my head here for like 10 minutes, then they tapped over here every 5 seconds for 10 minutes, and then over here for 15 minutes. It saved my life. TMS therapy saved my life, most definitely.
Now, is this the one where, because I know there's something similar where basically you cannot lie. Like you have to tell the truth. Have you heard of this?
No.
I saw it on, I think, Huberman. And it was kind of similar. They pinpoint certain parts of the brain with magnetic resonance or whatever. And it was, like it was crazy. But
And so what was this doing? Like what?
Yeah, well, it's for depression and anxiety. So what they do is they rest your arm like this on something, and then they put this thing on your head and find different spots, and your hand goes like this.
Oh,
Involuntarily.
yeah.
So they're looking for certain spots, and then they find that spot, and then they, so that's why they hit these 3 spots on my head. I went for 30 days.
I was getting ready to ask you. How long were you there?
30 days. So I went to Florida. My sister lives in Florida, so I stayed there. 30 days every day for 30 days. Probably took an hour, and I walked into this place crying. I mean, I was crying, technically crying when I walked in. I walked out a new man. I was a new man.
So you're there for 30 days straight, or
30 days every day for 30
every day?
days.
Okay.
They would put this thing on my head.
And did you just research and you found this, or did someone tell you this?
Yeah, isn't that something too? How God works. My sister had a friend. My sister's son went to school with one of the boys, and his mother owned this healing house place in Florida. And I just went down. They had a psychiatrist. They interview you to see how crazy you are. Okay. And then they do that, mapping of your head.
Yeah.
And then, it is. I would recommend it for anybody, because they don't give it to anybody. You have to have gone through therapy and tried medication, and you're still staring at the wall. And it saved me, 100%. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, and that was just recent. That was
about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. It was when I was in that bad place in my marriage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, second marriage.
Okay, so now you were in IT.
Yeah.
But you're no longer in IT, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I spent 30 years in IT, 16 with Accenture, and I migrated a lot of Fortune 500 companies to the cloud. So we got all their information, everything to the cloud. Now that everyone's in the cloud, they don't need me anymore, right? They need AI.
Uh-huh.
Right.
So I was more or less let go for AI.
Oh, okay.
For the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is what your full-time gig is now. You're speaking and
absolutely
doing what you absolutely love.
Should have been doing it a long time ago.
I know, right? Yes. I know.
But there's a time.
Yes, it is. And it's along the journey that you're on. And that's, you're here now to help people. And okay, so tell us one more time. So you have about your book and your series, just kind of.
And how would, if someone wanted to speak, if they wanted you to speak at their event, tell them how to get a hold of you.
How do we?
You can reach me at pdspeaks.com. That's my website. It has a contact form there that you can fill out, and I will surely contact you from there. So the book should be released in a month's time. I'm waiting for the final revision, and then it takes a few weeks for publication. I intend as well to do an audio book with that, so on Audible.
Yeah.
That's the way I listen.
Yeah.
That's the way I read, listen.
Yeah.
I'm not much. I never read when I was little, I was trying to survive.
Yeah, you sure were. Oh my gosh.
So, I didn't read it. I do the audio books as well, especially when you're driving.
Yeah.
It's easy. It's a good time for it.
Okay, Paul. So one piece of advice about resiliency. What I know that's a hard question.
Yeah.
But just you traveling this path and where you came from and where you are now, what is just one piece of advice that you would give an audience or anyone?
Yeah. Don't let it bother you. I don't let things bother me. If somebody's doing something, if somebody wants to act like an idiot, let them. Somebody wants to call me an idiot, so what? So I am responsible for my actions and reactions and nothing else. So I don't let other people's actions or their words bother me, because it's not. I don't let it in. So it's not important. So you control your own emotions. You can control what you react to and how you act, and you can't control other people's actions. So that's what I would give as the one comment.
Yeah.
Well, what about, let's go back 35 years ago in that first step. If someone's in just that spot, what's a good first step? I mean, it could be the simplest thing, but what would you suggest? Like, what was something that?
That's a great question. I don't know if there's any one thing.
No, but they got to take some kind of an action.
Yeah. Taking action is it's stepping out of your comfort zone is what it is. That's what self-discovery is taking that first step. Nobody wants to go to counseling. Yeah. Nobody wants to see a therapist. Nobody wants to ask for help. But, kids, the teenagers, 50% of them are being bullied with this this digital landscape that they're dealing with. But only 35% of teenagers that are struggling with anything ask for help. Only 35%. So 65% of our teenagers that are struggling with whatever it is aren't asking for help. So it's taking that first step out of your comfort zone and asking for help for that supportive adult or somebody that you trust.
Yes. And I think, and you said that throughout this episode, you took action, you just dug deep and you took action, and here you are, and you're really taking action now.
Yeah,
so
most definitely. If I wouldn't have taken action, probably 3 or 4 different times in my life, I wouldn't be here. Yeah. If I wouldn't have quit drinking, I wouldn't be here. If I wouldn't have played football, if I wouldn't have had my grandmother, and TMS therapy. Those 4 things.
Wow.
Is why I'm still here.
It's amazing.
Yes, we can't thank you enough for being here with us today.
Yes, and coming all the way down, we really appreciate that.
I know, yes, to be in person with us is just really
much more.
It's just good. Yeah.
It's much better.
Yeah.
Much better being face to face.
Yeah.
And get to meet special people like you.
Yes.
That's right.
And I hope that we can connect further. I think that there's a lot of things that we could do together and things like that too. Yep. So
I hope that's true.
Yeah. Well, we are so appreciative that you listened to this episode of Resilience Reborn. Once again, you can go to pdspeaks.com, right, to find Paul and look for his upcoming book and TV series that's going to happen in the near future as well, hopefully.
Yes. And we'll have all the links and everything.
Yeah, we'll have all the links posted. And thank you for being with us on this episode of Resilience Reborn.
Thank you.
Again, thank you.